Welcome to the SBI Podcast, offering CEOs, sales and marketing leaders ideas to make the number.
Welcome, SBI Podcast listeners and video podcast viewers. My name is Greg Alexander, and I am the CEO of SBI, a sales and marketing consulting firm dedicated to helping you make your number. This is the weekly SBI podcast, and its purpose is to help you make your number by getting your peers to share with you how they make theirs. Today's guest is Marc Osofsky. He is the Senior Vice President and General Manager at Lionbridge Technologies, the $600 million public company that is the global leader in translation services. Marc joined the company in 2011 as the Chief Marketing Officer to accelerate revenue growth by developing a new SaaS offering to be sold through e-commerce and inside sales channels. In 2012, he became an officer of the company and was promoted to the position of General Manager and tasked with leading this new division, now the fastest growing in the company. The division is now at $100 million and growing. So Marc, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Greg. Great to join.
All right. Okay, so the show today is meant to serve companies who are seeking growth by taking new products to new markets, which is not an easy thing to do, but if you can pull it off, it can ignite revenue growth. This is why Marc is on the show. He is qualified to discuss this topic because of the following. So first, he developed Lionbridge On Demand, which was the industry's first e-commerce solution for translation services for all content types. Secondly, he built an entirely new go-to-market model for this innovative product, which blends inside sales and e-commerce. Third, he built a predictive sales model, and we'll discuss more of that later. And lastly, but most importantly, he grew revenues a staggering 500,000%. I'm sorry, he grew revenues 500%.
That's, a little more realistic.
Yeah. There are many, quote, legacy companies out there right now trying to reinvent themselves to remain relevant in this cloud computing era. And you can count on one hand the number of executives who have this kind of experience, and Marc is one of them. So if you're attempting to ignite growth by bringing new products to new markets, pay attention. This is why you read, watch, and listen to SBI's content, because we bring you people like Marc to share his experiences with you. All right, we're going to use a section of our revenue growth methodology to guide our conversation. If you want to follow along at home, download a copy of our methodology at salesbenchmarkindex.com/2016 report. You know, trying to net out Marc's 4-year journey in 30 minutes is going to be a challenge. So we're trying to use our framework to make sure we don't wander off and turn this episode into a never-ending marathon. But let's jump into it. Marc, you ready to go?
Yeah, after that glowing intro, I'll see if I can live up to it.
I'm sure you can. All right. So the first step in our revenue growth methodology is market research, and this is where an executive gains a deep understanding of a market, specific customers in the market, the buyers in those accounts and their problems you hope to solve, and the users who will be using the product. You know, companies looking to accelerate revenue growth by entering a new market with a new product have a better chance to succeed if they first get themselves aligned with the external marketplace. So Marc, my first question to you is how did you find this growth opportunity?
Yeah, no, that's certainly the place to start. We went about it in a pretty specific way, and I'll try to share that here. The first thing is really looking at, the basics of the size of the overall market that we're playing in and growth rates. And there's some decent, secondary research on that. So that's some of the first stuff I looked at when I joined. But my bias is always to look for change. It's really hard to get someone to buy a new product when everything's going fine, right? They're not under any pressure to change. Nothing's really underlying is shifting. That's a very tough situation to go in and try to have a knife fight and get people to throw things out. So my bias is always trying to find something easier. So I was looking for underlying changes that were impacting the translation spend space, which is about a $33 billion space. And so some of the changes that we found, and these are kind of forces at work from kind of a McKinsey framework, some of these your listeners will be familiar with. So there's a huge shift towards content marketing, right? So marketing is all of a sudden in the last couple of years has to become a publishing company. So if you're a translation company, marketing is getting more and more content. The second thing that's happening is everything's going digital on the marketing side. And then the third thing is marketing is really trying to do things in a much more real-time nature, whether it's social or mobile or everything digital. And so all those factors really started shifting the translation spend away from the traditional buyers that tended to be more aligned with the product group. If you think about content within a product or training, support, to marketing. And marketing was really kind of a new buyer of translation, and they needed to do it in a new way. So that was the underlying change, and really identifying that early. I think we were one of the first ones to try to figure that out. And the way we figured that out is through, what I call intimacy, right? So how do you really get close to buyers and understand how they're responding to these changes and struggling with them? And so we use a couple of tactics. One I like is a standard win-loss analysis, really getting people to open up to a credible third party. They'll always share things that they won't share with you directly. So we did a bunch of those. The other thing we did is we created a LinkedIn group, and this was back in 2011, I believe, before they were so ubiquitous. So we created a global marketing operations group, and the whole notion was how do we get a group of senior marketing folks together talking about executing globally, which is what we care about from a translation perspective. And there really wasn't a venue for that, and there still really isn't. And so we put this group together just to focus on the global issues. And by creating the group and sponsoring it, I think we got it up to about 3,500 members now. It allowed us a thought leadership place to come in and have a lot of conversations. And we did this across, we did it in Boston, London, Seattle, Chicago, et cetera. And we did a bunch of these essentially focus groups that we didn't have to pay for. And we had great people and everyone was sharing. And so that really gave us a good sense of, that intimacy of how these folks are responding to the underlying changes that we had identified. Mm-hmm. And so from that, we really started to understand what the pains were that were unmet, what the frustrations were with the current solutions, and helped us craft a solution.
Yep. So some of the folks that are going to be listening to this may think that they have located a growth opportunity, and they may have recognized some changes like the ones that you mentioned, the shift to the marketing leader as the buyer, content marketing, et cetera. But they're not sure if they can win. They look at who the competition is and they're trying to determine, which specific customer problems should I zero in on? And given the alternatives, how do I know my company's unique advantages will allow me to win in that market? Because to get into the market, this is going to require some investment. So how did you figure out if you could win?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think part of it is you just have to believe in yourself. So that's part of the answer. The other part of it is testing. So what we did in these focus groups, right, essentially testing initial concepts that were more in wireframe mode, or mock-ups. So we didn't go build the whole solution. But we could tell the story and show enough screenshots to give them a sense of what it would really be like, and really push them. Is this the kind of thing you were looking for based on everything you're saying, right? Would you shift your spend this way if this were available, right? So we were able to essentially test market solutions through a very limited investment in just what we call clickable demos, right? So they look like a real thing to the uneducated, but they're very cheap to put together. So the combination of understanding the shifts that were happening, getting intimate with the folks and understanding how they were responding to those shifts, and then testing, these kind of trial products, gave us enough confidence at least to go to the next step in the process and put a little more investment in.
Okay, great. Interesting stuff. We're going to take a quick break, but don't go away, because when we come back, I'm going to ask Marc to discuss step 2 of our process, which is corporate strategy, and ask him how he collaborated with his CEO to define a clear vision of the future, determine a defensible brand promise for this new market, set realistic objectives, and build the unique capabilities needed to win in this new marketplace. So stick around after the break. You are watching SBI TV. This is a monthly web TV show featuring guests just like you, executives trying to grow their revenues. Each month, you can peek behind the scenes and watch your peers discuss their strategies for how they make their numbers. You are not going to want to miss this. Okay, welcome back. My name is Greg Alexander, and I'm the CEO of SBI. My guest today is Marc Osofsky, the Senior Vice President and General Manager of Lionbridge Technologies. Today, we are discussing how to accelerate revenue growth by entering new markets with new products. We're using our revenue growth methodology to do it, which you can find at salesbenchmarkindex.com/2016 report if you want to follow along at home. Before the break, Marc shared with us how he located his hidden growth opportunity by using various forms of detailed market research. During this segment, we're going to hear from Marc how he worked with his CEO to build a business unit strategy that aligned with the overall corporate strategy. So Marc, you and your CEO obviously had to collaborate on this greatly, because this is an entirely new business within an existing successful business. So how did you guys do this?
Yeah, not only was it a new business model, it kind of challenged our existing model as well. So we had that challenge to deal with. I think the short answer is we took it in a stage gate process, right? So I didn't try to go in with some big, huge 5-year plan asking for a massive amount of money. So I went in with a pilot, right? So we talked about in the first section, we've got these concepts, we've got this buy-in. I used that to get enough funding to create what we call minimal viable product, for those that are familiar with that terminology from a startup world. It's trying to put the minimal amount of investment into software development to get a product that you can take to market and start selling. So we took that approach, and we basically stage gated and said, look, I need this amount of money to do the MVP, get a small sales team in place, get the operations there, and we'll prove it out, right? We'll prove out the initial alpha customers, we'll get that investment, we'll get that feedback, and then we can revisit. So that was stage one. So that wasn't too hard to get him on board with that, right? It's relatively low cost, low risk. The next step, we got through that phase and had success, and obviously, refined things and improved it. The next step then was really building out a sales effort, and we decided to keep it separate again. The innovation that we were doing was essentially productizing what had been a service before. So in the industry before, with translation, you couldn't get a quote. You always had to talk to a salesperson. You couldn't just go to a website and upload files or videos or what have you and get an instant quote and just buy. So by doing that with Lionbridge On Demand, we lowered the skill level required to sell this product, because the products were all defined. And so we took this e-commerce model and took some recent college grads, and we wanted to prove out that we could sell this with a completely different type of sales force than our enterprise sales force. And so that was the second stage. So it was a lot of trying to figure out how to make that model work, right? We had never done that before as a company, and nobody had done it in the industry. So it was a bit of finding our way on what worked and what didn't there.
You must have been pretty unpopular at that time. I mean, many people in the company must have felt you were going to threaten how they've done things. So, or maybe even the CEO was concerned about cannibalizing the existing business. Were there any of those concerns, and how did you overcome them?
No, there definitely were, and I think if you're in an established, mature company and you're creating innovation, within the same general space, most of your listeners are probably going to deal with that issue. And if you don't do it yourself, obviously you're going to face it from startups. It's challenging. It's certainly not easy. I think the way we addressed it was, again, sort of in stages and letting people know first, look, we're testing this out. It's an experiment. Then we said, look, we're scaling this here with some kids, and we're just going to go after, smaller clients, smaller projects. Then we talked about just going after companies at a certain level. So we just kept moving up this staircase of being able to take on more and more. At this point, we're doing, $1 million deals over the phone with, I think our biggest client's about a $50 billion in revenue client, right? So we've been able to move all the way up into the enterprise space with this new capability. But that took a few years to migrate it. And then at the same time, we made it available to all of the existing sales force. So this is a new product that you can sell as well, and we dedicated a team to support them in selling it. So it wasn't, it was always there for them. And so those are the ways we dealt with it. It's never easy. I don't know if we did that as best we could, but that was the approach we took.
Well, one thing that you said there that I love is that you can either disrupt yourself or you can let a startup come in and disrupt you. And it takes courage to disrupt yourself. And you're right. I mean, productizing services, and making them available on the web and be bought like a product with a different global delivery model was going to happen eventually in your space. So why not get there first, which is great. Let me shift the conversation to competition and differentiation. So as I am listening to your story, I have some assumptions, and I want you to either confirm or disagree with these. And the assumption is that your differentiation was in the engagement model, how the service was bought and how the service was delivered, more so than, let's say, differentiating on price or differentiating on some type of service. Is that a fair characterization or no?
No, I think that's largely fair. I mean, the biggest frustration, I never articulated sort of the real pain that marketing was feeling, with these changes, but some of the fundamental challenges were speed, right? So sitting and waiting for quotes or waiting for people to respond, holding up campaigns and launches. So having this 24/7 instantaneous ability at any time to translate anything, through a web interface. So it's really the process, by which this is done and how it integrates into existing systems. So it's much more of a process innovation and an automation innovation. We did some unique things on price, and we've created some new offerings. But yeah, it's largely making it easier for marketing to get done what they need to get done.
Yep. And were there competitors that you were having to deal with, or was the competitor just the status quo, the old way of doing things?
Well, when we first launched, now we've got some imitators, but when we first launched, it was the status quo. Call up a company and send them your files and try to get a quote for translation. So that was basically the only option out there.
Okay. And then you mentioned that given your success, others have paid attention and they're coming into the market trying to imitate you. So what is your defense against that? Is it just continued innovation, or is there some other defensible position?
Yeah, I'm always nervous with continuous innovation, right? So sometimes you can end up like Microsoft Word, where you just keep layering on, feature after feature after feature, and nobody has any idea how to use anything beyond the first 10%. The nice thing, at least in our space right now, is there's a lot of challenges with marketing. So we're focusing on solving their whole problem around global digital marketing around, translating content. So, the first thing we automated was the core of it, upload a file, get an instant quote, order. But there's a lot more surrounding that, right? Yeah. So how do I integrate in with other source systems so I don't have to upload a file? How do I manage the purchase order process and invoicing and automate that? How do I find files that I translated? I knew I translated that video a while ago. I can't find it. And did we do it in that language? So how do you create a multilingual digital asset management system as part of this so you could find files? Mm-hmm. How do you deal with in-country reviewers, who have to review these files and provide feedback, right? How do you automate that workflow and feedback process? So that's kind of the roadmap we took, post the initial core solution. And it's really just solving that whole multilingual marketing problem. Yeah. Once we get through that, then I think we'll have to figure it out. But right now we're still a couple ahead of steps ahead of everyone else. Yeah.
And there's a unifying theme here, right? Which is all of these things that are on your roadmap are all designed to do one thing, and that is to make this easier, for the customer to accomplish their objectives. And it looks like there's still links in the value chain there to go after, which is exciting. All right, we're going to take another break. When we return, we're going to discuss the last 4 steps in our story here, which is some conversation around product development, marketing, sales, talent strategies, etc. So stick around after the break, and we'll hear more of Marc's story.
Making your number is hard. Your problems are complex. Complex problems need complex solutions. Introducing the SBI Magazine. Read in-depth stories written by award-winning journalists about how your peers have overcome their problems to make the numbers. When you need more than a tweet, social post, or blog article, turn to the SBI Magazine. Go to salesbenchmarkindex.com to subscribe.
Welcome back. My name is Greg Alexander, and I'm the CEO of SBI. My guest today is Marc Osofsky of Lionbridge Technologies, and today we're discussing how to accelerate revenue growth by entering new markets with new products. We're using SBI's revenue growth methodology to do it, which you can get at salesbenchmarkindex.com/2016 report. Before the break, Marc and I spoke about determining objectives, developing a brand promise for a new set of customers, sizing up the competition, and the building of a differentiated set of capabilities that allowed Lionbridge to win in the new market. During this segment, we're going to hear from Marc about developing and integrating the product, marketing, sales, and HR strategies into his broader strategy for this new market. So Marc, how did you build the product roadmap for the new market? And specifically, because you mentioned focus groups and LinkedIn groups, et cetera, there were lots of things that you could have gone after. How did you prioritize the things to go after first?
Yeah, well, in the last section, I talked a bit about sort of the broad brush of the roadmap. So what we focused on first was the core transactional aspect. I have this document, this file, this video. How do I get it translated? So that was the obvious place to start, and so that was the beginning of the product. I think what might be the most interesting, looking back, we took much more of a startup approach to the whole development process. And my background, previous to this, is with startups. So I actually didn't have a product manager. So the person owning the requirements was also the architect and the dev lead to start. But and so he moves extremely quickly, and he's very attuned to the space. And so we were able to avoid, what a lot of large companies get into, which is much more of a waterfall approach and a lot of committees and a lot of people having input into requirements and things just getting bogged down and moving very slowly. So it was really just he and I and input from the sales folks and customers and having, real-time interactions and moving very quickly in much more of an agile Scrum way, with pretty minimal documentation that allowed us to create this product, extremely quickly with limited development effort. Now there's cons to that as well, but I think that was really a key part of our success, especially early on, to get to market very quickly and avoid letting a big company kind of with its all its interested parties put too much weight on something and crush it.
Yeah, very interesting. Let's move on to pricing. So typically when someone's launching a new product in a new market, they work backwards from what they think the customer will pay, and they consider the cost to build, market, sell, install, and support the new product, and they use that when determining pricing. One thing you mentioned earlier in your conversation is that you built a new sales model from scratch, as opposed to selling it through the traditional sales model. Did you do that because you were trying to match a certain price point, or how did you think through how to charge for this new product?
Yeah, the pricing, there were a couple interesting aspects to pricing. One, we wanted to really simplify the pricing model. So historically in the industry, it was quite complex. There was different rates depending on which language you're translating from and to, and all sorts of additional added charges. So we wanted to really simplify things and put it in the context that marketing buyers could understand, not language experts. So we came out with a single flat price, for any product. Whether it's a video or a document, there's one price, and you can upload a file and get an instant quote. So that was probably the most innovative thing we did on the structure of the pricing. The other thing we did is, historically, as a company, we'd figure out profitability at the client level. So any large client services firm would, you're measuring profitability, per client. What we did is we wanted to, streamline everything. So, hundreds of customers are all buying the same product, and we throw all of that revenue and cost into a single bucket, and then built our pricing up from that. And so that's proved to be a very efficient way to manage the economics, and then enable us to think about pricing from a product perspective, not a client-centric one.
Interesting. Okay. All right, let's progress to launching. Obviously there was a lot of work put into this. You use the MVP concept to get out there, minimum viable product, did lots of testing. It sounds like it was a very methodical process, this stage gate process, as you mentioned earlier. Once you realize you got something, you probably want to pour some gasoline on the fire here. So tell me a little bit about the, kind of the marketing approach to launch this new offering to this new set of customers.
Yeah, it's interesting. We took a much more of a sales-heavy model. If you're looking at our mix between sales and marketing, we found that this category is kind of what I'd call a nuisance category. It's not something that marketers get excited about. They don't want to go to conferences, and the main topic is not translation. So it's a little hard to create awareness and excitement on a category like that. But there's massive amount of pain, so it's also very easy to get people on the phone and get engaged with them to lessen the pain. So we chose to take a pretty sales-heavy model, and built this sales team. And the biggest challenge I had was trying to create a predictable revenue model based on sales hires, right, and get that funded. Mm-hmm. Every company, the enterprise sales model has been around so long that it's just sort of assumed that it works, and everybody's got their own metrics about first-year quotas and ramps, et cetera. But when you're coming out with a whole new model, you actually have to prove it to the CEO, the board, finance, et cetera. So that first, year or so with that team, we were capturing all of the performance metrics and really trying to build a ramp curve for revenue. And where we ended up was an interesting model where we basically give a new hire 3 months to be cash flow positive, and then their monthly quota grows 10% every month And we talk about it as sort of a wave they got to stay in front of. And if that wave, catches up to them, they go on a plan and hopefully, can resurrect things. But from that approach, we were able to build a model and then show that it could be predictable, based on our results. So that gave me the confidence to go in with a, 40, 50 person hiring plan and really build out this team.
Yeah. So I love the way that you did that, especially with the escalating quota. There's a certain type of person who's going to take that job. So tell me a little bit about the hiring profile and what you did to make these people productive once you hired them.
Yeah, the profile, that we're finding is most successful. We take them right out of college if we can, or, maybe a year or two doing something else. We look for grit. So we look for someone who's faced adversity and overcome it. Could be help funding their part of their education or, any sorts of other challenges. Certainly an athletic background, kind of the classic sales background, is desirable as well. And then we've really stressed a teamwork aspect. So we've got a great culture with this group, so we really want to preserve that. So it can't be just a complete self-centered, want to crush the number themselves, but could care less about everyone else. So we do care about the whole value of the team. So that's, the profile, nothing too unusual there. In terms of training, we've gone through a couple iterations here. We've gotten quite structured about it now. So they go through an intensive 2-week process, learning, just what they need to know to be successful, and then they're immediately on the phones after that. And again, they got to hit that 3-month mark to be able to stay here. And then we cycle back about every 6 months or so. There's kind of higher value-added ways to sell the product and different modules, and so we layer those on, every 6 months. So the focus on those first 2 weeks is just to give them enough to communicate the core message and be able to handle all objections.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Interesting. Okay, we're going to take one last break. When we come back, Marc and I will discuss an action plan to put all this great advice to work. We call this the takeaway value, and it's right after the break. So hang in there for just a few more minutes.
Each day, you receive hundreds of emails, tons of text messages, countless telephone calls, and sit in too many meetings. How do you find ideas to make the number with all this noise? The SBI blog filters all this nonsense for you and presents only first-rate ideas to make the number. Simplify your life. Subscribe to one blog and read the best content. Go to salesbenchmarkindex.com and subscribe today.
Welcome back, everyone. Marc, let's put a nice bow on this. If you got hired by a company tomorrow to accelerate revenue growth by entering a new market with a new product, what would you do in year 1, year 2, and year 3?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think in year 1, as we talked about at the beginning, to me, the fundamental thing is finding the change. If you're trying to bring a new product to market, there's got to be some underlying change that's forcing buyers to look for something different, right? That's forcing buyers to feel pain. That's causing them, to want to look into the marketplace for better solutions. So it's really deeply understanding what that change is, and I think that's a step that's often missed. Folks will look at market sizing and growth and profitability and competitors, but not really understand what's the underlying factors that's impacting the actual buyers. So year 1 for me is really figuring that out and then developing, at the minimum that clickable product, right? Something that can demonstrate the solution as a product. Hopefully you've got an MVP done within that first year. But I'd take that whole first year, to make sure you get that right. Because if you get that wrong, then you're going to waste a lot of money and time. And then year two, year two is really about what I call finding repeatability. And this is more about the sales and marketing than the product itself. If the product concept is right, the roadmap becomes pretty clear, and you've just got to execute on it. Year two is really about marketing and sales, and especially if you're developing, if it's a newer product that requires a different sales channel than you have. It's really figuring out how do you develop repeatability there, right? How do you sell? What's working? What are average sales sizes? What can reps do? It's building that whole repeatable model. And you've got to get enough confidence in that, to be able to go for the large dollars for scale. And so year two is repeatability, and year three is scale, right? So if you've got the product in year one, you got repeatability in the sales and marketing model in year two. Year three, you step on the gas, as you said, and you can go in with confidence. Here's the model. I know we can repeat this. I know how it scales. Give me 50 heads. Give me 100 heads. Let's do it.
Yep. Okay. Really, it's an awesome story and great advice. And I love what you just said there regarding year one, year two, year three. Let me give my audience my take on this. So entering new markets with new products in pursuit of growth is hard to pull off. If you're attempting to do this, you need a well thought out strategy. And I know that sounds so simple, but let's not confuse simple with easy. If you get this part wrong, this part being the upfront strategy, you're going to have a disaster on your hands. And I see people going too quickly. So my advice is to slow down, spend the time thinking through everything, and rely on a proven methodology to guide you through it. Today we talked about methodologies. We heard some things from McKinsey. We heard some things from Marc's unique perspective. We reviewed pieces of SBI's revenue growth methodology. There's lots of them out there, and they're really valuable. Spend some time studying them and learn how to do this correctly. Here are a couple of tactical things you can do. If you want to make sure you get this right, I would get a copy of our report this year, which is titled How to Make Your Number in 2016. And I would turn specifically to the product strategy section. And I would toggle between that and the corporate strategy section. I think there's some questions in there that might help you think through some things. You can get that at salesbenchmarkindex.com/2016 report. If you want some help with this and you want somebody to come out and kind of walk you through the exercises in this report, it's really more of a workbook. Go to the same website, salesbenchmarkindex.com/2016 workshop, and request one of our team members to come out and spend some time with you, and they'll be happy to do that. So Marc, I really appreciate you letting us interview you for the show here. What you've done is truly remarkable on many ways, and I could have talked to you for hours. So congrats on all your success, and more importantly, thanks for sharing your wisdom with our audience.
No, happy to join, Greg. It's been a lot of fun.
Great. I also want to thank you, our audience, for tuning in. This show is doing really well, and because of that, we're able to get great guests like Marc. If nobody was listening or watching or reading, Marc wouldn't be interested in coming on the show. So keep watching, tell all your friends about it, and I wish you the best of luck as you try to make your number.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on SBI services, case studies, the SBI team and how we work, or to subscribe to our other offerings, please visit us at salesbenchmarkindex.com.